Do I need to wear the mic? Can you all hear me okay? I have a loud voice anyway. It carries, which causes problems in meetings and things like that, but it's really handy for these types of situations. Before we start, I want to kind of gauge the temperature of the room. Raise your hand if you are in the technology side of your nonprofit or university. Okay, so it appears like most. Raise your hand if you are in the development side of your development office. That looks like more than half. Are there people who cross both sides? Is that what I'm seeing there? Oh, I see heads nodding. Okay, so we have a lot of people who have that cross-functional role of translating the business and development requirements to the technology teams. Okay, good, good. So this is a good little, this is a nice mix for the room. Do you need me to wear the mic? Is that what I'm seeing?
Yeah,
okay.
Sorry, we're recording. So.
Oh, right. How's that? Hello? It's not working. Okay. All right, great. Well, as he mentioned, my name is Ryan Teeples. I've been doing CRM consulting. I actually have been working in nonprofit for about 4 years now, and have worked on multiple implementations of CRM-related technologies in that space. And recently founded a company called Foundation XRM, which you'll kind of see a little bit, oh, there we go, which you'll hear a little bit about, and I'll show you at the end a demonstration of our product and talk to you a little bit about that. But I want to focus today on how the technology for donor and alumni management and just CRM in general has changed, and how that affects you in your development offices and in your university technology groups. So without further ado, let's jump right in. The first question I'll ask is, what is CRM? That seems so simple, but I'm going to be using that term today, but I want to make sure we're all clear, because I've walked into lots of nonprofits and talked about CRM and been said, wait, can you please tell me what CRM means? Does everybody in the room, raise your hand if you know what I mean when I say CRM? Okay, not enough hands, so let me just explain real quick. In the business world, CRM is customer relationship management. It's the discipline and the technology for managing the relationships with your customers. It's pretty straightforward in that regard. In the nonprofit and in the fundraising space, we kind of turn it on its head a little bit and call it constituent relationship management. The functions are different than customer relationship management, but the principle is the same. There's an individual who is a breathing, living human being who might work for an organization or might be part of a larger organization, but there is a relationship to be cultivated there. And in order for that relationship to be cultivated, there needs to be some sort of way to track the interactions that you have with those people in those organizations. So at its core, the principle is the same. So when I say CRM today, I'm either referring to the technology or referring to the discipline of constituent relationship management. For the technology purposes, when I refer to it as a technology, here's what I mean today. It's a solution for managing the relationships and data which drive fundraising success. Now, there's a key distinction there. If your CRM solution, if your donor and alumni management solution is not driving fundraising success, then it's being executed wrong, and there needs to be some changes. And the good news is the technology environment has rapidly evolved over the last 5 to 10 years that those shouldn't be problems anymore, and we can talk about those and help you understand. Let's talk quickly about the CRM market history. Uh-oh, I got some bullet points out of order. In the 1980s, you had these terminal workstation databases. How many of you are still operating on a terminal workstation database? Don't be ashamed, it's okay, raise your hand. We have one person who's not lying in the front of the room. I'm working with a customer right now who's converting from an AS400 green screen application. That thing is blazing fast, and they have customized it to the nth degree. That thing does things that it was never intended to do, but it's quite beautiful in some ways. But they can't find anybody to develop on it, can't find anybody who's willing to work with it. They have employees quit simply because they don't want to learn this new technology. It can be a real challenge. Those solutions were great at the time. Like I said, they were blazing fast and they collected a lot of information, but they were primarily databases. They were a window into a database. They didn't provide a lot of functionality or a lot of outputs back out aside from some basic reporting. In the 1990s, you got to what I call the black box software market, where you have these closed source solutions that are not customizable. Does everybody know what I mean when I say that? Raise your hand if you have a closed, non-configurable system today. Maybe you don't know what I mean, because more of you should have raised your hand. In the general CRM industry, there were solutions like Siebel and PeopleSoft, and I'm sure many of you probably still have PeopleSoft in your universities or nonprofits today. But these solutions were delivered to the customer as they are, and if you want to make changes, you write big checks to Deloitte & Touche and Capgemini and groups like that. To a large extent, that's still part of the marketplace today, but there are some changes that have happened that are important to note. In the 2000s, configuration and configurable software applications became very prominent. So the ability to not just be stuck with the software as it's delivered, but have the ability to change it a little bit. And in addition to that, you also have the hosting model starts to emerge. Salesforce.com really turned the market on its head by saying, we're going to deliver you a software application, but you can change it, you can configure it. And then beyond that, as we look at it today, we are moving toward what are called platforms. And you notice I use that word at the end of that sentence, these solution platforms. Not only are they just focused on a little bit of configuration through what we call an SDK or software development kit, they are configurable by the end user, so you empower the end user with more ability to configure the system and make changes and use the system in the way that each individual role wants to use the system. But also, the actual platforms, the actual technology is customizable and extensible. No longer, if your core function is donor management, but you have event management's a bad example. Let's say that you want to do alumni group management as a function. A platform allows you to do that under the same technology without having to go out and buy a separate solution. And that's how the industry has evolved. And again, Salesforce was the leading driver in that. Microsoft jumped on very quickly. There are still solutions out there that operate in this 1990s environment, in the business CRM space as well as the nonprofit CRM space. But that world is evolving and it's changing, and that means good things to you as people who are on the technology and on the business side, and we'll talk a little bit about why as we move along. Here's one of those green screen applications. Raise your hand if your development system looks like that. No? Okay, there's one hand in the back. That's good. You see this one is kind of like the 1990s Windows 3 or Windows 98 kind of look. Raise your hand if your system looks like that. Okay? What do the rest of your systems look like?
Oracle Forms.
Oh, Oracle Forms. Okay, that's a good one. Okay, we'll get to that. So here's many people become confused when I start talking about platforms and start talking about software applications. So I want to make sure that we understand the difference, because there are clear distinctions that need to be made. The first is that a software application is just something that you use to perform a certain set of functions, and those functions are typically finite. What are software applications we use every day? Excel is a very common one. What else? Google, yep, Google is a web-based application. Yep, these are all applications that we use, but they give us a finite set of functions. It's always amazing to me when I go into technology organizations and they've decided to build something from scratch. And I always say, well, how about word processor? Did you build a new word processor? And they say, well, why would we do that? We have Word. Well, exactly. Why did you build this other thing that there are solutions out there for? But there are software solutions that we use every single day, but their functions are finite. They're fairly limited. You can't make Word into PowerPoint. You really can't do it. You can't make Word. Well, you can make Word into Excel, sort of, if you embed an Excel object. So bad example, but you can't make one software application do something it wasn't designed to do. That's really the key to a software application, is it's finite. A platform may include applications as part of the platform, but it's built upon a framework that can then be extended, customized, integrated to, configured, and it can be made to do, to some extent, almost anything. Does anybody have an example of a platform? So Facebook is a platform for developers. Yes, to a large extent. You can use it to host your company website if you want. You can build a social network around it. You can use it for internal collaboration. So to that extent, yes, Facebook would be a platform. The problem is everybody knows Facebook as an application in this room. So it's both an application and a platform. Who had a thought in the back? Yeah, Salesforce is definitely a platform.
Google Drive.
Google Drive, I'm not familiar enough with Google Drive to know whether it's a platform or not, but I believe that they have some developer tools that sit on top of it that allow you to use it for a myriad of things. Yeah. So these are all platforms. They give you a framework and say, Here is a basis of technology. There are applications that live on top of it. So for Facebook, the application that lives on top of the platform is the Facebook website that you go to. But beyond that, you can build it, develop on it, configure it to do lots of different things. Okay, those are the key distinctions. So that in mind, how many of you feel like your donor management solution today is an application only? Okay, there's still a lot of tentative hands. How many of you feel like it's a platform today? Okay, less hands, but less tentative. Okay, that's good. So the reason you're tentative, and this is the reaction I get every time I ask this question, is because most people, there's not a clear line in the sand between what those two things are. Most of your software applications allow you to make some configuration changes, but typically they don't go beyond the finite set of tools or finite set of purposes or functions that the software is delivered for. A platform is designed to allow you to do anything. So for example, I worked with a university who is using a platform for their donor and alumni management system, but their PR department is also using it to manage media contacts. Okay, those are two very separate functions that would not typically be done by a single piece of software. But a platform allows you to extend beyond that and allows you to do things that you normally wouldn't do. Now, I'm not advocating that's the right thing to do for every organization. I'm just showing that there can be very different functions that can go on between the two, and that extensible platform enables that. How many of you have processes and software systems that exist outside of your donor system to perform a function that your donor system just doesn't do? Okay, every hand in the room goes up. A platform would allow you to take all of those processes or most of those processes and make them part of the core application that you work within. Okay, now does everybody kind of understand the difference? Okay, this is very difficult to explain until you start to get into the industry and start to look at it. What does it mean for fundraising organizations? The first thing is, how many of you have to feel like you frequently change your business processes to adapt to a technology? How many of you feel like you've been able to adapt your technology to meet your unique business process? Okay, so it's kind of a blend in between. That's good. The idea is that a platform doesn't limit you to being forced to use either the semantic language or whatever processes are put in place by the designers of the software. You're not bound by those. Instead, you can go outside of them. Does anybody have an example that they think they know what I'm talking about? How many of you have a multi-stage donor prospect management process? Okay. How many of you have a two-stage process? How about a three-stage process? Okay. How about a four-stage process? Okay. Five-stage process? Where did the rest of you go? Six-stage process? Okay, so we're up to six. Seven-stage process. So there's some seven, okay? Do we have anybody that has an eight-stage process? 9, 10. Okay, so we've run the gamut from two-stage prospect management processes to eight-stage management processes, or prospect management process. That's a very clear gap. If you buy a software solution that is not configurable into multiple stages, then you have to change your prospect management process to match the number of stages that are in the solution that you bought. With a platform, it doesn't matter. You could have a 50-stage process if you want. I would not recommend it, but I'm sure there are some people who would, if left to their own devices, would come up with that. But the platform allows you to take, that's a great example of something that a platform allows you to, you're not forced to take your business process that you've developed over the years and change it to match what the software designer thinks is best. Instead, you can adapt. Did anybody have any thought? Feel free to interrupt if you have questions or have any thoughts about that. Is there anybody who's not clear on that wants to ask a follow-up question? Okay. Next is keep your own semantics. How many of you call your donors donors in your system? How many of you call them constituents? Okay. How many of you have a different name for them? Okay, well at least we're kind of down to two. How many of you call your prospect management process well, we know that there are multiple stages, so everybody's going to have a different name for every stage. There's a fairly common semantic language across the fundraising industry, but there are some places where those semantics can vary drastically. The one place I see it is what people call their proposals, or their asks, or their initiatives, or their opportunities, or I've heard probably 50 different names for those things. If you buy a piece of software that doesn't allow you to change those naming conventions, you're stuck. A platform allows you to keep your semantic language across the entire software system so that whatever your organization is familiar with and whatever language you speak culturally, your system can reflect that. You're not forced to change your culture to reflect the language of the software. How many of you have ever had to have gone through a software implementation where you've had to change the culture of your language, change your semantic language to match the software? Okay, yeah, most have. Was it frustrating? I see heads nodding. It's like pain that no one wants to bring back to the surface of their brain. I think most people have repressed a lot of those memories. The next thing is the automation of automation of processes and enabling procedures without development. How many of you feel, how do I ask this question with the mix of people we have in the room? How many of you are on the technology only side? Okay, how many of you on the technology only side wish that you could enable your end users to perform some of the tasks they're constantly asking you to perform on their own? Okay, every hand goes up. How many of you are on the opposite side and are not involved in the technology but are just on the business side? Probably less. How many of you feel like you never can get anything from your I don't even need to ask the rest of the question, right? Okay? What you guys don't realize is you're victims of the same problem. And that's that the software in fundraising is fairly limited in terms of the things that you can do with it, so you have to develop around it. And it's not designed to empower end users to be able to perform certain functions on their own. A platform kind of takes that and turns it on its head and says, look, you give the technology team the control to build permissions based on role and based on function, but enable the end users to do so much. We live in an environment where self-service is so pervasive that it's kind of insane when you walk into the office and realize that you can't even change a parameter on a report. When you can go to even Facebook that the gentleman brought up as an example, you can configure that to be customized to your individual needs. Platforms are coming into the CRM space and they're changing that mind frame so that you as the end users are empowered, which leaves the developers free to do what they need to do and the technology people free to do what they need to do, which is actually the bigger things which drive real improvement in the systems. They're not bogged down running report requests. How many of you when you need to get a report, have to put it in a queue and it can take 2, 3, 4, 5 days or even weeks to get a report out of the system? Okay. How many of you can generate a report on demand or can generate a custom report on demand or custom list of names on demand and are not Michelangelo customers? Okay, so only a few. So these are the types of things that the move from software to platform start to enable. The next is extension of the system. Make it do anything that's core to your fundraising, or it can be ancillary to your fundraising. How many of you think that how many of you have one system for all of your fundraising activities? Okay, a couple. How many think it's 2 systems? 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Okay, good. I've asked that question before and gotten up to 10, in fact, but it looks like most of the room is somewhere between 4 and 7. Now, I want you to, those of you on the business side, look at your technology partners and say, oh, I can start to see why you're not able to process some of those requests. They're managing multiple systems to perform core functions. When you start to think about an organization that has a donor and alumni management system, and then for fundraising, then they have a alumni group management system, then you've got a recruiting tool potentially, or a career services tool. You might have a different platform for your online giving. You might have a different platform for your telefund group. You start to add those things up and you realize that most organizations have 6+ systems to manage their core fundraising. That's because software solutions in the past, because they had those limited functions, didn't allow you to do all of the things you needed to do, so you had to buy multiple software systems to kind of fill out the package. The move to platform changes that and allows you to start to think about one system being able to do multiple things. Now, I would never advocate that it can do all things, but it can start to do multiple things in a single platform that share data. How many of you feel like a lot of your reporting or your data problems are because data exists in multiple systems across different organizations? Okay, raise those hands high, because and in many cases, those different systems are actually owned and managed by different individuals who may or may not have any incentive to help you get data out of it. There may not be a common join or a common ID. You may not be able to actually match data from one system to another. These are problems that every fundraising organization faces, and it's because of those software silos that exist. How many of you feel, oh, go ahead.
I was just going to ask, but don't you think that that'll continue if it's customizable?
To a certain extent, but it eliminates those data silos, because if you can configure a system to do the things that multiple databases used to have to do, then you've at least got the data into one place. And to a certain extent, you're right. You will never eliminate those silos of information because people will be able to customize, but at least it allows the developers to have a little bit more control over that. Or not the developers, but the technology people and the business people who make the joint agreements can have control over what those silos look like. And at least they're sharing a common platform, and you gain economies of scale by being able to develop on a single application as opposed to 5 or 6 different applications. Any other thoughts? Sorry, I haven't paused and taken a breath. Anybody else have any questions? We'll do a full Q&A at the end. But integrate all you want. How many of you feel like one of your biggest challenges is integrating one system into another? How many on the technology side feel like the business believes that it should be easy to do that, but it's just not? Okay. Sorry, that's a softball, I know. And how many on the business side think that it should be we have the data over here, it should be so easy to match it up with this other data? You can raise your hands. I mean, I think that all the time too, and I understand the technology side. These things are not easy because they exist in these multiple silos. On a platform, platforms are designed to be integrated to. Software applications actually have incentive. They're incentivized to be somewhat closed, because it's, whenever you open up an API, then you've got to support it. Then you've also got to, you're losing a little bit of control. There are security holes that open up. Platforms are designed to be integrated to, whether it's integrating to your Exchange server with Outlook, so that when you send an email to a donor, it automatically tracks it in your CRM system, all the way to you need to bring in, you want to bring in data from your front-end website and say, whenever a donor visits any page on our university site, I want to know that information. That's the type of level of integration you can get to by going to a platform. And in addition to that, all of your software applications can speak to each other, or they're actually not separate applications at that point. They're all on a single platform. One of the other things is that how many of you feel like you've done a good job at taking your disparate software systems and have built a platform for getting them to communicate to each other? Has anybody done a good job of that? I've seen some that are quite remarkable, to be quite frank. They've done some amazing things. But what you've essentially done is created a platform for data integration. The platforms that exist in the CRM space now bring that to the table as part of the out-of-the-box solution. Adapt technology as your organization changes. How many of you have ever gone through a software implementation and done it one way based on your requirements, and by the time you got done with the software implementation, your entire business process had changed? Okay, I usually get more hands than that. There's some hands over here a little bit hesitant. How frustrating is that? Extremely, right? There's nothing more frustrating than figuring out, putting a business process into place, enabling the technology, and then having your business process change. But that's the reality of the world that we live in. Things change. How rapidly? Think about your daily process that you work through. I'll use myself as an example, probably a bad example, but I wake up in the morning and my phone is, on the nightstand, and what's the first thing we do? Grab our phones, check email, check social media, right? Did that happen 7, 8 years ago? Not at all. Our daily processes have changed so dramatically. Why should we be surprised that our business processes change dramatically and rapidly? Platforms allow you to shift your solution without having to go through full-blown software implementations or purchases of new software. Instead, you can have your platform help you adapt those new business processes in an environment that you've already created, and you're not left chucking everything that you've done and starting over. And then finally, and this is a fairly limited list of benefits. There are more than are listed here. But the next thing is you can reduce costs, and you also have the option of hosting. Now, I know to a lot of organizations, the cloud or hosted is still a bad word, and that's fine. The platforms still there are platforms that allow you to host to run your own infrastructure and your own server farms. But you can reduce costs not just by having the hosting option, but you reduce costs by gaining economies of scale by having all of your software systems on a single platform. Your licensing goes way down because you're buying a license for a platform instead of individual software applications. And in addition to that, because you're enabling the end user with with the ability to perform more functions, then your development team, your inside technology team is less bogged down with requests of things because the end users can now do some of those things. So there's a lot of cost reduction to be gained there. Okay, so how do we evolve from databases to fundraising solutions? Let me ask you this. How many of you feel like your current donor and alumni management system actually helps you do a better job raising money? Okay, less than half of the hands went up. How many of you feel that that's just a fundamentally major problem in the industry? Okay, every hand should have gone up, right? Your system should help you raise more money. So how many of you feel like your donor and alumni management system today is simply a database, a repository for information and names? It doesn't provide value back to you. Okay? See a lot of that as well. Okay, one of the things I try to explain to people is there's an opportunity to get beyond being just a database and developing a true fundraising solution. What are the distinctions? A database is focused on inputs. How many of you feel like your donor management system today is based on inputs and not focused on outputs? Okay, I would tend to agree with most of you. A fundraising solution has as its primary focus is delivering outputs that are intelligent, that allow you to make intelligent decisions, perform the right task, it makes recommendations of things that need to be done, and it allows you to ultimately raise more money. So can anybody look at these inputs here and tell me what the output's going to be? Yeah, okay, so most people are able to look at that and say, okay, I can tell by those inputs that it's going to be cherry pie. So, but hold that thought for a minute. Apparently my animations decided to stop working. Here are some quick thoughts on inputs versus outputs. An input might be, on that first bullet point, what donors might be interested in an upcoming event. Okay, the input would be, you need to go into the system and put the events that your donors are attending. Instead, the system should be recommending to you the events that your donors should be attending based on the data that you have. What about, in my next annual campaign, how can I make an ask more clearly rooted in linkage data? How many of you feel like you can go to your database today and answer that question? Okay, a couple. The system you shouldn't have to go to the system and ask that question. A system should be producing outputs that answer those questions for you. Now there are a lot of inputs that are required to deliver those outputs, but the key function here is that you're shifting the system from being focused on taking data from you and you being a slave to the database to the system is providing data back out to you that can be used and is actionable without having to run complicated queries and do complicated work to get that data back out. So let's go back to the cherry pie example. Here's what a focus on output should deliver. One is more funds raised. I present to you, or I propose to you, that if your donor management solution is not helping you raise more money, then you need to figure out what you need to do to get a donor management system that helps you raise more money. Because if you're not raising more money, then it's all a waste. You can go back to legal pads and spreadsheets, or maybe stay on legal pads and spreadsheets. Anybody legal pads and spreadsheets still? Okay, good. Second is you become more efficient in your work. We'll see this in a minute. What time do we need to, what's the? 10:50, okay. I'll quickly go through these so I can show you. A good donor management system should provide tasks to you and present you with the next thing that you should be working on, regardless of your role in the organization, to help you become more efficient in your work. There should be transparency to influence and contribution. How many of you hear from researchers or people in the telefund office or people in different groups of your organization that say, I don't know if I'm making a difference or not because I can't see what my overall effect on fundraising is? How many of you feel, okay, I see heads nodding. I spoke to a researcher once who said, I love my job, but I don't know if I'm making any difference. When the reality was she's making a tremendous difference. The problem is the data, her work is not being tracked through the system, ultimately to see how much she's influencing fundraising. A good platform and a good system focused on outputs creates transparency into the effect that everybody has on the fundraising process at all levels of the organization. The next is there should be a focus on linkage, ability, and interest. I'm very surprised. Well, we're here at Drive. The University of Washington has a tool called Michelangelo, which I think is fantastic. And its focus is to help you get more quickly to your linkage, ability, and interest data. A good donor management system should have done that already. The next is an ever-expanding set of integrated data. How many of you feel like your data set is shrinking? I hear laughs, right? Of course, that's laughable. How many of you find that your set of data is expanding rapidly? Okay? As social media becomes more open, what would happen to your organizations tomorrow if LinkedIn said, hey, we're going to open up our API. If you want to go glean information based on email and pull it into your databases, you can take employment, education, all that information back into your databases. It would explode, right? Your linkage, ability, and interest data would get greater and greater. As that ever-expanding set of data grows, the importance of having a platform to be able to expand with it becomes vital. If it takes an act of Congress to get a field added to your database, then you're not going to be able to handle these changes that are coming. And quite frankly, you'll already be behind. Next, so I have this mantra, and my mantra is that your donor and alumni management system should help you deliver the right proposal to the right donor by the right team at the right time. How many of you can raise your hand today and say, I feel like my donor management software helps me, that does this for me? So we all have work to do. So next is access is vital. Being able to access information wherever you are becomes important. Now, there are security concerns in this, and you want to make sure that you have a platform that allows you to control those security measures. But we live in a day and an age where if you can't access your donor information on your phone before you're walking into an appointment, that's sad. It should be much easier than that. We'll show in the platform that we've built, we have the ability to integrate to an Outlook client, so you can access your donor management data through Outlook, through a mobile app, through the web-based interface, light data entry portals or light portals for users that aren't necessarily full users of your system. How many of you can access your data through Excel? Okay, there's an interesting stat out there that shows that the majority of people who use business intelligence tools use it to build these complicated data models that they then download into pivot tables into Excel. It's kind of the dirty little secret in the analytics industry. But you should be able to, why have to go through this rigmarole to get to that point? Why not just be able to go straight from Excel to your data source and be able to pull it? And then donor and online giving portals. How many of you have figured out how to expose in your online giving portal or some other portal give your donors the ability to go on and see their giving history, for example? Okay, update contact information, choose communication preferences. Okay, not enough people raise their hand. Those are all things that in this day and age should be much easier, and they can be with a platform. So I'll show you. I'm going to show you in the last few minutes. I'll give you an overview of the platform or the solution that we've built on the Microsoft platform, my company, Foundation Next Generation, we built on the Microsoft platform. We've focused as much as possible on outputs. Now, our solution is currently is in development, continued development, and so those outputs are growing rapidly. But our focus is to be not make you a slave to your donor and alumni management system, instead to make it serve you. Next is it's integratable, customizable, extensible. I mentioned before, we have groups that do things, everything from independent study work in their independent study department, all the way through to, and donor and alumni management, all the way through to things like managing the PR contacts and managing advisory board members for curriculum inside the same platform. And also I put up there affordable. How many of you feel like your donor and alumni management system today is affordable? Hey, 2 hands, okay. Our solution can be hosted or on-premise. That is one distinction between us and Salesforce, is that if you want to host it on your own infrastructure, you can. And feel free to come talk to us as you see us throughout the conference. We're happy to talk about it. We love this industry and love this space, and we'd be happy to show you. So real quick, these are the functional areas that our solution covers. I'll do kind of a quick overview and show you what a platform can look like. Let me go over here real quick to the... So, wow, this is a really small screen. If you're on a normal size monitor in front of you, you don't have these scroll bars and things like that. You have a lot more real estate to work with. But you'll notice right off the bat that the system is focused on outputs. So this would be a sample development officer dashboard. A good platform solution allows you to tailor the experience by role. So if I'm a development officer, this might be my dashboard. But let's say I'm actually a gift entry person. My dashboard might show the batches that are, and I apologize, the internet's pretty slow in here, might show me the batches that are not yet processed, and maybe here's the check or the wire transfer that I'm looking for. If I'm a researcher, I might see a queue of research requests or reports that we've just completed, or maybe we have a refresh coming on our data that we need to look at. The point is that regardless of your role in the organization, you can have a customized experience that delivers the data to you that's relevant to you when you need it without having to go to separate places. The next thing is visualization. So I'll go back. I'm a development officer. Terminology again, I'm using the term opportunities here. These are major gift proposals that I have to make. As you can see, I have one coming next week, and that's why it's at the top of the list. And then I've got a little pipeline report that tells me, hey, you've got that $150,000 ask at the top of your pipeline. It's also the biggest piece of your pie, and starts to can prompt you to say, hey, have you finished the actual written proposal? And so you can come in and add a task and say, I need to add that written proposal. I need to create a task for a written proposal. By the way, when you add a task here, anyone want to guess where it's going to show up? It shows up in your Outlook tasks. If I had an appointment right there, it's going to be on my Outlook calendar. If I send an email to a donor from this solution, it'll actually add it to the sent items in my Outlook folder, and I can choose whether to track or not track the responses that come. So those are the types of things where I say we're focusing on outputs as opposed to inputs. The goal of the system should be to make your job easier while collecting data that continues to make your job easier by providing the data back to you in a way that's actionable. Excuse me. The next thing is you'll notice you can actually create what are called, I keep wanting to touch the screen and scroll. That doesn't work. I'm not using my own laptop, so I'm a little bit out of sorts here. Give me just a second. One of the things that you want to be able to do is allow what are called, allow different views of the system. And I showed you the views for different types of dashboards. But within those individual dashboards, you can create views for you can create personalized views or system views that are the same for everybody and can be shared. But so let's say, for instance, that I'm a development officer and I'm really focused on opportunities without new activities the last 30 days. So I've got a bunch of proposals. I want to know the ones that I have no activities for the last 30 days. I can quickly and easily select that, and I'll see a list of the people that I need to contact because I've got opportunities open. And I can create these for myself, or I can share them with other development officers, or the system administrator can share them with everybody. Maybe here's my list of committed expected major gifts. I can go in there and say, hey, who is committed but we still haven't received the check for? Oh, okay, I've got $1 million check or wire transfer that's sitting out there. Maybe I ought to follow up with Ashley Johnson and find out where that check is. What's the expected date? Targeted fulfillment is 3/6. Maybe I'm expecting that check. Was that Friday? 3/6 Friday. If I've got that check or that wire transfer that's supposed to come on Friday, maybe it's a good idea for me to call Ashley on Tuesday or Wednesday and just say, hey, just making sure everything's still okay, and so you can alert gift entry if something changes. The idea is that you can create these lists of data that are relevant, actionable, and immediately personalized to the individual who wants to see them. Any questions? Sorry, I'm moving very quickly. We're running short on time. Does anybody have any questions? Go ahead.
When you're focusing on output, that's really, I mean, that's great, but it's half the job. Getting the information in there.
Yeah.
It's not all being fed automatically from other places. Checks still come in the door, and there's a lot of data entry.
Yep.
That process, is that sacrificing?
No, so in fact it's the opposite. We've tried to make the data entry process much more simplified and much easier. So I'll give you an example. Here's an example of one of those major gift opportunities that I opened up. This one is for, we're looking to get a student life building donation from John Donor here. And you can actually create, you'll notice that you have this little section up here. We've built it so that you can require data to be entered before you can advance into the next stage. Or if you don't want to use that, you don't have to have it. So in this example, I'm not requiring any data to advance in stages, but instead I'm collecting data that's useful to the development officer as he's going through the process of actually cultivating the relationship. But this data is going into the database, and when I'm done with this and I change this from prospecting or I move it over to committed awaiting fulfillment, that actually takes all of that data, pushes it to a gift record that then can be waited to be fulfilled. So the gift entry person doesn't have to re-enter all of the data that already exists in the system, and it collects that data from the prospect, the development officer, whatever you want to call him, up front, so that it reduces the data entry burden on the back end. And so we've tried to think through those workflow processes and say, how can we reduce data entry across the organization? Because if you reduce data entry, those outputs come. So your question was, what about the other side? And my point is, it's not the other side. Without those data entry inputs going in, we can't provide the appropriate outputs. Did you have a question?
Yeah, it's two. It looks like your foundation platform is using dynamic CRM.
Yeah.
And you customize it to your own products. The second question is it HIPAA compliant?
Say again?
Is it HIPAA compliant?
Yeah, so you can build the security roles to do any of that. So are you in a hospital organization? Yeah, so absolutely. So the security roles in the way that they're built in the platform allow you to control permissions across the entire application and across the platform based on role and user. And they can actually inherit those permissions from, if you use Active Directory federated services in your other systems, you can actually inherit those from that as well. And then you can control the other piece of it on the server side, whether you're using hosted or whether you're using on-premise, depending on what those issues are. If you want to talk about that later, that's a more complicated question that we can address.
So have you been involved in any migrations from an existing white box system to this one that one?
I have. As you might imagine, data migration is always the biggest challenge in any implementation. I think one of the most interesting things to me is that the flexibility of the platform can be a blessing and a curse. Because what happens is you have these older systems and they say, well, we do it this way now, so let's create a field and a table to do that. And so because the system will allow you to do that, it creates a problem. So you have to make sure that your requirements are really good and that you're focused on all the right things and you're not doing things just because that's the way you've always done them. Because your data migrations can get really, really complicated if you're just creating the same old system in a new skin. But regardless of I'll say it this way. The technology on the back end makes data migration a lot easier and makes it a lot smoother. And because it's integratable, you can actually reduce a lot of data entry by taking data from other systems automatically instead of manually. But data migration is and always will be one of the biggest challenge in any kind of implementation. And no platform is really going to change that.
So give us an example of how you would get large amounts of data, like NCOA updates, into your system.
You could either use the web services that come with the solution. Again, it's a Microsoft product, so their web services library is really robust, and that's how we've done it in the implementations that I've worked on. And you can also go directly to the database if you want to, although that's it's kind of it's not recommended as a secondary option. But there's no issue in. Are you talking about like if you got 5, 10, 15 million records you're trying to push in a night or something?
Well, yeah, just basically batch data into that.
Yeah, it would be no different than any other system except that you have a huge library of web services available to you now that open up possibilities you didn't have before. Someone had a question over here?
I look for me that when you migrate your database to new system, you use more resources, right? And also, how much time you think it takes and resources it takes if you compare that to, for example, regular database?
In terms of the data migration? I wouldn't hazard a guess that any solution is going to be less than another in terms of data migration. I don't think that our solution provides any savings in data migration time. Instead, what it saves is on the configuration and implementation side. So being able to adapt the system to your business processes. Maybe I'm wrong, but I haven't seen anything yet that indicates that there's one solution or another that the data migration process is reduced, because most of the work in data migration is in mapping and cleanup, hygiene, and retooling data to match to take it from the old system to match the new system schema. And I don't know of any way to streamline that except for just having really good people who understand data. And I don't think that our solution is going to make any dramatic increases in that process.
How about the resources that you take? I mean, you take compared to regular database, you take 10%, estimate how much resources. I mean, it looks for me that it consumes more process system and hardware.
I'll tell you what, come talk to me later and we'll talk through it, because it doesn't take less resources. It doesn't take more resources, it takes less.
How are you, one of the things that we struggle with our fundraising is it takes so much time to put all that data in. We need to be able to deal with not entering data in your dashboard.
Really? Has anybody ever heard that before?
The struggle with the argument that you're doing this work anyway, you're just putting it in one place, not five.
Right. That's the answer to that question. That's the first answer. The second answer is that you have to provide value back to them in order to get them to see the value of putting the data in the first. I mean, it's his answer to it's the other side of the coin as the gentleman in front of you asked.
But you won't have that value out the minute you go live.
No, it takes. Right, but you can still provide data out, but the more outputs you give to them, the more quickly they see the value of putting inputs in. So for example, here's the mobile application. This is going to be really hard to see because my screen's not very bright right now. But I don't know if you can see it or not, but I have a dashboard here that shows me, here are my activities, the tasks that I need to perform, or the phone calls that I need to make, or the phone calls I have made. I've got one that's alerting me it's overdue because it's gone bright red. These are the things that you expose to your development officer and say, when you leave a home and you've made a proposal, you go immediately to your tablet or your iPad or even your desktop, whatever, or your notebook. You open it up, you add your notes from that session as an activity, you send whatever emails are appropriate. All of that's tracked in the system the second you hit send. And then the next time, so the guy told you, hey, I'm going to consider your proposal, give me 3 weeks. You set yourself a task for 3 weeks to follow up on the proposal. It's all in the system, and then it's going to alert you when you sit at your desk in 3 weeks. You're going to get a task that pops up that tells you it's due that day or the appointment that you scheduled. So you start to create these outputs, and then suddenly the value of inputs become very, very clear. The other side of that is you can make organization. I mean, to some extent, the organization has to buy in. There have to be mandates made. Are we out of time? Sorry, I apologize. Please come talk to me if you have other questions. I'd love to chat.